Your name says it all. AgriTalk. Any questions?
Welcome back. Gina McCarthy, EPA Administrator, was in Missouri last week answering farmers' questions about EPA's proposed rule for the Clean Water Act, the Waters of the U.S. rule, as it's being called. And she was, as she told us, trying to reach out, open some dialogue, listen to farmers, and try to bring some clarity to the issue. Well, today I talked with Missouri Senator Roy Blunt, and I asked him what did he think of EPA Administrator McCarthy's visit to his state and her message to those that she had a chance to talk with about this rule.
Well, her message appears to be that the administration is always right and everybody else is always wrong. Any questions, any challenges, I think she used terms like silly and ludicrous. In fact, in one comment by the Missouri Farm Bureau, who talked about the concerns farmers had about how this would impact the ability to use their land, her comment is that's just hogwash. Well, I think she would have been better off spending a little more time listening and a lot less time talking, and she might have been able to figure out that not only are farmers and farm families concerned about this massive extension of what the EPA thinks they can control, but so are our realtors and home builders and frankly anybody that owns property, cities, municipalities of various kinds are concerned that they won't be able to move forward in any kind of realistic way with the projects they'd like to complete. And this is just what happens when the administration and the federal government believe that the laws don't apply to them. I mean, clearly the EPA, rightly or wrongly, was given the authority in the Clean Water Act to regulate navigable waters, and suddenly they seem to have decided that any water that could ever flow into a navigable water, which would be virtually all water, could somehow be under their control because of that. And I said on the Senate floor the other day, Mike, that there's no way that any reasonable number of people looking at the legislation itself would look at the word navigable and think it means what the EPA now says it means. So we need to get back to changing the law rather than thinking that the EPA has the authority to write not only the regulations but the law itself.
Now, she told us here on AgriTalk last week that she's not trying to regulate more and that she's not trying to redefine navigable. Doesn't sound like you're buying that argument.
No, I'm really not, and I don't know how you could reach that conclusion if you look at the rules that she's proposing. Not regulating more, not redefining the law itself is just, I think, contrary to the facts. And people are concerned about this. They should be concerned about this. That's why I joined Senator Barrasso from Wyoming and 28 of our colleagues to introduce the Protecting Water and Property Rights Act that would just simply stop the EPA from taking over private and state water in the United States. And we believe that's what this regulation does. I think there are at least another 10 senators that agree with us. I think at least 40% of the Senate and maybe a majority of the Senate, if they really look closely at what she's trying to do, would quickly wind up on the same side as farm families all over America.
Do you think that, and this is one of the areas we got into in our discussion last week with the administrator, the concerns over the lack of clarity and how farmers and landowners think they're doing the right thing and are told they're doing the right thing only to find out later that EPA says they are not. How do we avoid that moving forward? Will this legislation clear that up?
Well, I think what we see here is the constant moving of the goalpost, and we need to get beyond that and get to where people have not only rules and regulations that make sense, but rules and regulations that they can rely on. That's one of the reasons, Mike, that for both in the House and in the Senate, I've been for members of the House and Senate having to vote on final regulations that have any economic impact. The House and Senate may not be the very best place to implement all of the laws that the Congress passes as the Constitution allows the Congress to do, but the House and Senate need to take responsibility for whatever that final regulation is. And, my view, not only are the regulators in so many instances now out of control, but they're also unaccountable. And we need to put somebody in that chain of decision making that voters can get their hands on. And so in the House and in the Senate with Rand Paul, I've introduced legislation called the REINS Act, which really means just that, to put more reins on government by requiring the House and the Senate to approve rules and regulations before they could go into effect.
We're talking with Missouri Senator Roy Blunt. Senator, what about concerns that if something more isn't done, that leaves agriculture very vulnerable to potential lawsuits at some point because of runoff into streams and rivers and someone coming back and filing litigation against farmers and ranchers? Are you concerned about that, and how do we address that?
Well, I am concerned about that, and I think we address that by not seeing this kind of regulation go into effect. We're in an election year. I think there is a very good chance that this is going to be an issue in a number of the states this year where either senators are running for a re-election or there's an open Senate seat. And this is the kind of thing we ought to talk about because, Mike, there's so many unbelievable opportunities in front of us for agriculture. I think we're seeing some real important things developing in a way that makes agriculture a rapidly changing field of opportunity. And, for the first time maybe in generations, as people now choose to go into agriculture, they're looking not only at something that's going to be an area of rapid change, but also an area that has real potential in a global economy where world food needs are going to double between now and 2070 to have economic rewards as well as the rewards of meeting this great challenge. Essentially, we're going to have to produce as much food in the next 55 years, figure out how to produce as much new food as we did in the previous 10,000 years. And the middle of the country is going to be critically important in that. The whole country is going to be important in that. Sharing our technology, but also figuring out how to meet those world food needs. Once people get the better food, they interestingly never really want to go back to the food they might have found acceptable before, and we're going to see both because of population and expanding economies. This desire that projects this huge opportunity in agriculture, and if we don't take advantage of it, some other country will. So we have to have rules and regulations that make sense, that have a cost-benefit analysis, that don't slow down for no reason at all the potential of America's farm families to be part of this time of great opportunity.
And of course, to take advantage of that opportunity, we need our infrastructure. Part of that debate and concern right now is with the Highway Trust Fund. How do you think that will be? What is the best way, in your opinion, to address this?
Well, we do need our infrastructure, and that's very important. If you can't connect to the world marketplace, you've missed that. You've missed the opportunity in that way, just as we could miss it in regulation or bad utility bills. The greater use of more American energy, competitive utility bills, but an infrastructure that works and not only connects the whole system together, not just the highways we drive on, but what are we doing to be sure that the private investment in port facilities and the public investment in port facilities work. I think the river system, particularly the Mississippi River, is about to become more important than it's been in 100 years as we think about how we connect to these new markets, and whether that's biomass in Europe, where 20% of their utilities are going to be biomass driven by 2020, or food opportunities all over the world. Connecting that is important, and both the individual states have to look at their part of this, and at the federal government, we need to look at a transportation funding system that people have always thought was fair because it adequately reflected using that system, and figure out how we can continue to make that fair in a world where people get more miles per gallon on their car, where some people are going to be using products to power vehicles that aren't part of the fuel pump system, and how do we do that? And we need to look at the short term, whatever it takes to get there, but more importantly, how do we take this tax system that for half a century everybody's thought one of the most fair things the government did, and project that into the future so that we do have that transportation network.
All right, that's Missouri Senator Roy Blunt. Senator, as always, thank you for joining us on AgriTalk. We look forward to having you back with us again
Mike,
soon.
Great to talk to you. Look forward to talking to you again soon.